is this tale in Scotland. In the States, I think it's something I remember hearing about vaguely, but the vibe I got is like something that this is almost like part of Scottish lore at this point, that in terms of what kind of penetration the story
Oh,
had.
it's true.
It, yeah, it's a huge story. It was and still is a huge story. I mean, it's like when I've been telling people about doing this film, I'll say, "You remember that guy?" And he went back to high school, and everyone's like, "Oh yes!" It's like one of these. It just hit a nerve in some way that I think I don't. Maybe as Scots, we think we're kind of canny and we can tell when someone's pulling the wool over our eyes or something. So maybe that was why it caused so much consternation as an cultural way. But yeah, it is a huge, huge thing. Don't you think, Jono?
Yeah, it was, and I guess, and in a weird way, because Alan was kind of involved in an earlier kind of incarnation of telling this story on film, that never came to fruition. Alan was kind of always tied in with it for me because we'd kind of got it in our heads that Alan was to play Brandon, and so that was that kind of became tied in, and it kind of became known as this kind of great Scottish film that was never made. And so to be able to kind of bring it to the screen is just it's just kind of unbelievable for me.
So, Jono, you were one of his schoolmates?
Yes, I'm kind of a human spoiler, but I suppose I should kind of fess up on these things that, yes, we can say, because we don't reveal it until the end of the film, actually. But yes, because I didn't want people watching it going, "Oh, he's saying that." But yes, in 1993, Brandon walked into my classroom, and kind of this film is the story of what happened over the next 2 years and how we just, Brandon basically arrived and climbs the social ladder of high school life in a way that we never could. And when we find out the reasons why he was able to do that, it's all hell breaks loose.
Alan, what was it like for you to embody this person in this way? It was an amazing performance. I literally don't know if I've seen one like it before.
Me neither. Unbelievable.
Bless you, Lou. Thank you.
Unbelievable.
It's so funny because the best thing about this for me is that at my bar at Club Cumming, and it's a cabaret bar, and I'm a bit sort of. I always think if we're going to have drag queens, I think they should do something other than lip syncing. They should have skills, and so if they are going to do lip syncing, I think you better fucking know the words, bitches. And so now I feel I've got a kind of evidence to say, just look at this. I lip sync an entire film. That's quite a good. I've got a good sort of armor in my backpack for an errant drag queen now. No, but so what was interesting was that it, because as Jono said, 25, 6 more years ago, 25, is it? I was going to make this film called Younger Than Springtime. I was going to direct it and going to be in it about this story, and it just, like these things do, fell apart. And I was sad, but you moved on, things, and it was very, very close to the time it had actually happened. So it's just a funny and great thing about, I think, getting older, is that things come back to you, but in a different way and in a better way. And I just think it was really, when Jono asked me to do this, well, first of all, I was like, I was going to play him in a film. And he was like, yes, I know. And I feel like actually, it's just great the way the story came back, and that this is a much more authentic version of the story, and also much more provocative in terms of what it asks us all as people in society to, what do we think, what is wrong, what is right, what is our moral, do we trust people, what did he actually do? That to me is really fascinating, and for the actual doing of it, it was a really weird thing to have a voice already. When you come to perform anyone, you have all these different things you do and process, or not a process, but you have these different things you can use to make up the person. And the one major one was already there. So I'd never done anything like that before. But it was kind of, it was fascinating. And I had enough sort of knowledge of him beforehand to bring, I suppose. So it was, but I'm glad. I actually am much happier that the film that I made about Brandon Lee is this film all these years later, that rather than that one back then.
I didn't know this at all. That is amazing.
Oh, did you not know that part, did you?
I didn't know that part. And I think it's woo-woo, but it's perfect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you said, it's come full circle. And so that's why you're so brilliant at him. You are him. You are him.
When I first played a clip for Lulu, showed her a little bit of the film, of Alan's performance, and she said to me, God, did Alan have a cold that day? Do you remember? And I was like, no, that's not his voice.
Remember
And
much
that says something about the power, how amazing that lip sync he does and what that performance is. And I don't think anybody's done that.
I think the whole film is really unusual. I don't know that I've seen anything quite like this before.
How did you get Brandon's involvement?
Just reached out to him. Just we had an email exchange and we hung out for quite a bit in the kind of run up to the interview. He's a really fascinating individual, like super intelligent, still, I mean, the same as he was all those years ago, and still has that focus and that drive and that kind of determination. And he wants people to know his story. And I think he hopes that in some way things can change for him if he gets his story out there by whatever means he can. So that's I think why he was minded to share it, and he was really kind of magnanimous about kind of sending me off into with this interview and saying, let's kind of see what comes of this. And I know that that he had an understanding that I wasn't off to tell his story exactly the way he had told it. He knew that I was off to dig and find other classmates and teachers and things and try and get a kind of broader sense of what happened over those 2 years. So basically that's how it came about.
Was one of his requirements that he not portray himself?
That he not be seen on camera. That was a stipulation, basically. He's kind of set me this gauntlet. If you can make a film, if you can have me tell my story, but without me appearing on camera, then go for it, kind of thing. So I'd always had in my head, some of these lip sync movies that have been past, like The Arbor, and things like that. And so I knew that was an option. I didn't quite know how I would find the right actor to kind of portray that. And we went, but in the back of my head, I always knew that, back in the day, Alan Cumming was attached to do this movie. And would you believe it, Alan is my friend, and can I shame my friend into doing this project that I don't quite know what it's going to be like? And basically that's what I did. I had no shame and I cornered him into doing it. And same with Lulu, like basically just making
the whole thing's amazing because
things.
I'm learning, more about it sitting here, but the whole thing's, it's been amazing from beginning to end.
Lulu, how did you become involved with the film?
Lulu had to drop the restraining order against the #1 Lulu fan here to let me make the film with her.
He told me the story and I thought, oh God, yeah, like you said, Alan, you mention it to people, and especially Scottish people, they go, oh yeah. And that was kind of like bringing back the story. What an amazing, and I remember I had a dinner party, and when you were at my house, and we told it to a few salubrious guests who were absolutely gobsmacked. And one of them was a big American actress. She was gobsmacked at the thought of this because it is a fantastic story, isn't it? I mean, and then he managed to, and how amazing that he managed to, COVID stopped a lot of things that he wanted to do, and then he found a way around it. Don't you think, Alan?
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. Yeah. So I'm very happy to be a part of it because it sounded like a fabulous thing. Absolutely.
I think it's interesting if you're used to working in a certain way. I think that the making of a documentary is so fascinating because you start off with some material and then what the story of the film actually starts to happen in the editing room afterwards, and that's been really interesting to me, is watching the different versions of it and how the whole thing has kind of developed and finessed. And I really enjoyed being a part of that too, because normally you just get a script and then you do it. So in a way, the script doesn't get made until the film's finished in this scenario.
How did you learn your part? Because the lip syncing is flawless and it looks so natural that it just, it looks like simply that you're talking.
When you do films and you have to loop yourself, you have to make it look, often in films, there are scenes on the screen that are not the sound you used at the time. It's done later in a studio for a variety of reasons. Right. So I've had experience of doing something like this. I've never done an entire character. I've maybe done an entire scene, of a film where it's windy or something happened or someone's mic was broken. But so I've had experience of the actual doing of it. But with this, I had the interview. I had in advance. I had the whole interview that Jono had done, and so we just had them on loops in the room. We just had each bit of each quote or on a loop, a sound loop, and they would just be beeps, and I would just say them, and I would just go again, until we felt that we were. And some of them are quite complicated, and it's about breathing, and you get better, you get more into someone's skin, you understand how they breathe. And he has a mask-like face. He doesn't reveal very much in his face, but he is quite strangely animated in his mouth and in his sound. Even though it's not a very wide range, it's actually quite animated within that. Anyway, blah blah. It's not brain surgery. I just did it millions of times, like a sort of a little dog learning tricks.
Like the world's
It was
longest
really trippy.
ADR
It was-
session.
We're also-
The world's longest ADR session, and yes, getting thrown snacks every now and then.
Jonna, what do you think in terms of what you know of Brandon now? Do you think he is a sociopath, a narcissist, something something more benign? I mean, what is
something more benign? He's really charismatic an engaging individual. I spent quite a lot of time with him in the run up to the interview and for the interview itself. There's a reason why he was so successful at school and was able to engage with people and stuff. And I don't think he even acknowledges it himself, that he is, actually has this engaging quality, and he's so eloquent as well. And so I think that's the thing. I think maybe some people might come to the subject of this film and expect a more scandalous film. Now, whether that film would be more scandalous if the boy in his class hadn't made it, I don't know. I've something of a fondness for him. Yet, do I think everything he did was right? No, I do not. But does everybody deserve a second chance or a third or fourth chance? Then that's the questions that the film throws up, and I have to say I don't think I answer them in the film. So I'll leave it for everybody else to decide.
What is he going to do next? That's the thing. What would he do next? I mean, he is a fascinating character. He just doesn't, and he wants to go on, doesn't he? He wants to go on.
And that's what everybody wants, isn't it? Everybody wants to get to that successful point in life, and he's just found a really unusual way of doing it. And actually, when he explains the reasons why he did it, it kind of makes sense, but you have to be there.
Alan, can you tell me about if there's any recent films that have impacted you in particular?
My favorite film this year is this animated film, actually, called Flee.
Oh, yes.
It's an animated film about this Syrian refugee it's about kind of trafficking as well, people trafficking, and he eventually gets out to Scandinavia, and it's just a really beautiful film. I mean, it's horrifying what happens, and just like the thing about, you don't realize that someone has to have this horrible series of dangerous events just to flee their country that they're from, but then also after that they've got to deal with all the sort of shame that they lied and they betrayed people in order to get to safety. It's just such a great film, and I guess I really appreciate what animation, and it's a similar thing in that it has the live interviews of the real people involved. There's a filmmaker who interviewed this man who is the boy who was in Syria and who gets out, and so
he went to high school with. The main character came back to high school in this animated documentary. And the director's like, hi, I'm going to make a film about this in 20 years' time.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned Flea, because I did think of Flea when I was watching this film, in terms of, using the narrative, using animation as sort of a narrative conceit to tell a story.
Yeah.
And by combining the two. Jonna, what was, in terms of developing the story, how did you get to a point of realizing, aha, this is going to be the way to do it? Because it's not really Flea aside, it's not what you call a familiar formula.
No, I sort of made it up myself. So the way I came to it was sort of the pandemic, basically. So when we set off on this, I know I had in my head, I'm going to make my movie, and I'm going to shoot this in live action, and it'll be period. And then somebody explains budgets to you, and you're like, oh, right, okay. And so we were looking at different ways of doing it. And we kind of we were looking at ways of shooting actors on green screen, and we tried something where we rotoscoped over the top of the actors and stuff. And the test that we did of it just had we just couldn't get it to land right. It had kind of that kind of weird uncanny valley effect where it just didn't sit right. And I came to the animation through a kind of weird, it was pandemic binge watching of the show WandaVision on Disney Plus.
Oh.
And I was really blown away by their production design and the direction, and how in each episode they exactly portray a different era of American TV sitcoms. And that kind of sowed the seed in my head of what if there was a way we could do on our budget, look at those forms of animation that were big in the 90s and earlier, and bring that to screen. And what I realized was, just actually digging and reading loads of graphic novels actually, and the kind of and what cartoons do, and the cartoon face is the universality of the cartoon face, and how we can project so much upon two little circles and a line, and in a way that the actors, when we were filming the green screen stuff and the rotoscope and everything, it was just throwing us off too much. But the kind of the way we can connect, and especially when we're kind of echoing those sort of animation styles of the eras, the way that the audience can connect with that. I'm not going to say that like I'm some kind of, that was my genius idea. I just kind of vaguely stumbled into it, and it seems to have worked. So let's go with it.
I think it was genius myself. Oh, he's my friend, but I do think
There's little Easter eggs in there actually. If you look, Lulu's character wears the same color as she did in To Serve with Love and things like that. So it was great fun to be able to. It's the same dress as your.
And I'm only singing. I'm only in a film about a school, and I'm only taking a kind of reverse role.
You've got a niche, Lulu, and you're sticking to it.
I know, but because I'm so old, I'm getting so goddamn old. He couldn't make me a pretend sort of classmate.
Speaking of To Serve with Love, I wonder if I can get a couple of thoughts from you in terms of the legacy of Sidney Poitier with his passing. I mean, I'm sure that was a wrench for you.
It's something I think that most people who know Sidney knew was imminent. Just didn't know when it was going to happen. But I was surprised at when it happened, how gut-wrenching it really is, because it's the end of an era.
Mm-hmm.
He was the pioneer, the trailblazer. And, when I made that film, I really had no idea what I was going to do. Kind of like this one, when I said yes to you, I didn't know what the hell I would be doing, but I said, yes, I'll be involved. No, not really. I mean, I was 16. And I really didn't get the full meaning of what that message was from that film, and then of course, as the years go on, I observed Sidney. I knew him, and he was a teacher in the film, but I think he always was a teacher. There was a message in every movie he ever made, and it was profound, for Black people, of course, but really for all of us. He lived his life on the down low. He was very discreet, dignified, and he's just he was inspiring in every way possible. And my heart sort of aches a little bit that I didn't spend more time with him and get more of his wisdom. And I put him right, because I am a big Obama. I don't know what your politics are, but I loved Obama. I mean, I had a big crush on him, if you want to know. But anyway, I loved him. I loved his politics. I loved Obama's stance in the world, the way he thought, the way he held himself as a human being. I think there's a parallel with him and Sidney. Very upright, a great human being. To say it in a couple of words, I can't.
That's fine.
He was, and I think everybody knows that. Don't you agree? Everybody knows he was a great man. Yeah. It's a great loss, but he left a tremendous legacy.
How do you think your movie exposes people to ideas that they haven't seen before? What do you think are the ideas that really resonate, that are kind of fresh and new?
When someone does something that is generally perceived as bad, as wrong, morally wrong, vaguely criminal, yet at the same time they did some good to people on the way to that. That to me, I think is really interesting. I love that little guy who was his friend, who was Brandon.
Oh yes, I love him.
The fact that his life was changed so positively by Brandon, and you can still tell that he glows when he thinks about him, and that there's things like that. Nothing is black and white, and nothing, and also that people deceive each other all the time in our lives. It's part of how we exist as humans. We're not sort of linear in that way. So I think I just love the sort of way it makes people ask questions, and this thing about would you trust this person to be your doctor if he was. I mean, that to me is such a clever way to end it. Otherwise, what is the problem then? You know. And I think that we're just annoyed. It's sort of like it makes me think that we were just annoyed that we got it wrong, and that we were deceived. And we're deceived all the time. Like sometimes we want to be deceived. We go to plays and films to be deceived.
Sure.
And if it happens to us in real life, we can't cope with it. So that whole kind of morass of that is the thing that I think is really successful, because you come away from the film being asked questions and being challenged about things that you didn't think you were going to, even if you knew the subject matter at the beginning.
I think the deceiving, though, that he did wasn't against any human being. It wasn't against everybody. It wasn't. That's. I mean, I don't want to be deceived. I'm sorry. I could argue with about that. I mean, we can imagine people are one way or another, you know, or we can be duped into thinking that a person is this or that. But that's got a lot to do with our perception. I just think he wasn't a bad person. He really wasn't a bad person. Yeah. But he was amazing in the fact that he was one-pointed. He wanted what he wanted, and he found a way to get it done. There's something to admire in that, in a way, I think. But it's kind of twisted, you know. There's two sides to the story. It's fascinating. He's just fascinating. Yeah. That's why I think people will love this film, because it's such an interesting subject. What's that? It must be my bedtime, or is it time to get up?
I get food now. I get food.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, lovely to talk to you.
All right. Bye. Thank you.